Imagine an open field, misty from the first morning lights. The enemy, restless, beats shields, screams, howls like a caged beast. But on the other side, absolute silence. The Romans, static in formation. No sound, no unnecessary gesture. Only eyes fixed on the commander and the heart beating to the rhythm of the strategy. That was Rome's first blow, silence. Unlike tribes who shouted to impose fear, the Romans imposed fear for control. It was like facing an army of living statues ready to explode into action at just the right moment. And this moment was not improvised. It was calculated, trained and obeyed to the letter. Roman discipline was not just a virtue, it was a weapon. Each soldier knew his place, his role, and most importantly, his silence. And so it was that Rome, without taking a step, was already beginning to win. Rome was not made up of sharp swords or numerous legions. It was built on a much firmer foundation, unbreakable discipline. From the most basic training to the battlefield, each legionary was shaped to obey, to think as part of a larger body, and to act as an extension of Rome's will. There was no room for ego or improvisation, only for precision. Imagine hundreds of men marching as if they were one organism. They advanced not by instinct, but by commands conveyed by signs, banners, and trumpets. It wasn't just beautiful to look at, it was deadly effective. In the midst of the chaos of war, while enemies shouted and disordered, the Romans maintained order. Every shield raised at the right time, every spear thrown at just the right moment. This allowed for complex maneuvers, rapid formation changes, and victories against armies that, on paper, were more numerous or even fiercer. Silence was not passivity. It was attention. It was readiness. It was dominance. If this level of discipline and strategy moved you, repay this knowledge now with a simple gesture. Leave your like. This helps spread this powerful story to more people. And if you want to keep diving into secrets that books don't tell, subscribe now to the channel. Here, each video transforms the way you see the past. Most ancient peoples use sound as a weapon, drums rolling, war cries, tribal chants. Noise was a catalyst for courage, an instrument of intimidation. But the Romans reversed this logic. Instead of shouting, they waited. Instead of noise, silence. This silence was not empty. It was tense, heavy, almost unbearable to those who heard it from the other side. It was the sound of absolute discipline. On. The battlefield shouted orders were easily lost in the maelstrom of combat, but the Romans had a sound and visual code. They used the legion's eagle, which guided the eyes of the soldiers, and instruments such as the tuba, a long straight trumpet, or the curved horn to convey loud and distinct commands. These sounds were not constant. They were punctual, calculated, and replaced the disorganized shouting of the other armies. In the midst of the fighting, a single tuba sound was enough for hundreds of men to change the formation, as if they were a living machine. Do you think that war is won with force or intelligence? Among the most impressive formations of the Roman army was one that turned men into walls, the famous Testudo, or tortoise formation. Imagine dozens of shields coming together like the scales of an impenetrable creature, protecting soldiers from arrows, stones, and spears that came from above and sides. But this formation required something very rare in the middle of battle: perfect timing. To function, all soldiers needed to lift, line up, and hold their shields in the exact position at the right time. One mistake, 1 second of hesitation, and the testudo would break down, exposing everyone to a massacre. Therefore, during the training, the silence was absolute. Each man heard only his breathing, the sound of the march, and the centurion's visual commands. There was no room for improvisation. Just obedience, trust, and focus. The Romans did not win only by force, but by the order they created in the midst of chaos. The Testudo wasn't just a defensive tactic, it was a symbol of the Roman military mind, where each soldier was part of something bigger than himself. While the Romans opted for silence as a strategic weapon, their greatest enemies preferred the exact opposite. Tribes such as the Gauls, Germans, and Britons made war a spectacle of sounds. Wild screams, beats on shields, rustic instruments. Everything was used to generate fear and confusion. It was chaos against order. The Gauls roared like wild beasts before the fight. It was an animalistic, primitive sound made to destabilize. The Germans, on the other hand, used the baritus, a war chant that began as a whisper and grew into a deafening roar, creating a sensation of an avalanche about to swallow everything. The British, under the leadership of figures such as Queen Boudica, invoked their gods with tribal screams, trying to shake the enemy's mental structures. These practices were very effective among their own warriors, as they increased morale, unity, and fighting spirit. But against the Romans, it often had the opposite effect. The more the enemy screamed, the more terrifying the silent response of the legions, motionless, impassive, ready to act at the right time. AD 61 Britannia was on fire. Queen Boudica led a brutal revolt against Roman rule. His warriors, furious, vastly outnumbered, advanced en masse. Screams echoed through hills and forests. Tribal drums shook the ground. The sound of British hatred seemed invincible, but the Romans remained silent. They waited. In close formation, shields raised, eyes fixed, no hasty advance, no response to the insults, just silence. And then, just as the British came within reach of the pila, the short Roman spears, came the rumble. A collective, fierce cry that broke the silence like thunder in a clear sky. That cry was not just sound, it was a trigger, an order, a collective awakening. The legion attacked with precision and brutality, as if the pent-up rage had exploded in one movement. The British, taken by surprise, broke formation. What was strength turned into panic. Rome won not only with swords, but with the right time to break the silence. The Romans were not just warriors, they were scholars of war. When they realized that a tactic worked, even if it came from an enemy, they didn't hesitate to adopt it. And that's exactly what happened with the war cries and tribal chants. From the 4th century, the Roman army began to change. Pressured by unstable borders and the constant need for conscripts, Rome began to integrate more and more soldiers from the provinces and the margins of the empire. Among them, many Germans, former enemies, now allies and soldiers. These new fighters brought with them their customs, their traditions, and of course, their sounds. Baritus, for example, started to be used by some auxiliary units. Rome, which had previously valued absolute silence, now understood that certain situations required other strategies. It was not a contradiction, it was evolution. But even when absorbing these practices, the Roman essence remained: discipline. The noise, now controlled, was allowed only if it was useful. Order still reigned. And the mix of cultures made the Roman army even more lethal. The secret of Roman power was never only its strength, but its ability to adapt. Rome was an empire, yes, but above all, it was a living organism. And like any intelligent organism, it knew how to change in order to survive. The shell changed, but the core remained: discipline, strategy, tactical superiority. With the inclusion of soldiers from the frontiers and peoples previously considered enemies, Rome began to unite the best of both worlds. Order and aggressiveness, silence and sound, discipline and instinct. It was a military mosaic where each piece, however different, fulfilled an essential function. Even with these transformations, the basic structure remained firm. Roman generals still commanded with signals, classical formations were still used, and strategic silence was still valued at crucial moments. Noise was integrated, but it did not replace it. Rome did not resist centuries out of stubbornness. It lasted because it knew how to absorb, adapt, transform. Even the sound of the enemy, when useful, became a new weapon in his hands. Over the centuries, Rome has faced all manner of enemies: indomitable barbarians, internal deserters, quiet betrayals, and political storms. But even when the legions were at a disadvantage, there was one thing that still distinguished them: strategic silence, a trademark that inspired fear, respect, and also doubt. The Roman silence on the battlefield was no accident. It was a collective construction, the result of training, loyalty, and command vision. While tribes advanced in shouting, hoping that the sound would break the morale of the enemies, the Romans waited, not with fear, but with precision. And this waiting was an echo of the Roman mind. Cold, rational, calculating. Many of Rome's victories came not from direct combat, but from the emotional breakdown of the enemy. Undisciplined soldiers hesitate in the face of the unknown, and silence, when used well, becomes a psychological abyss. Doubt about what comes next can be deadlier than the sword. Rome knew how to master even what cannot be touched: time, sound, expectation. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, much of what was built in its legions continued to echo through history. Tactics, formations, and even strategic silence have been studied, imitated, and adapted for centuries. And perhaps this is Rome's greatest achievement: to create a form of war that depended not only on strength, but on the mind. Roman silence did not die with its generals. It is present in modern armies, in tactical formations, in moments when order overcomes chaos. It is in the eyes of those who wait for the right moment, in the soldier who does not rush, in the general who knows that talking too much can cost everything. It's also outside the battlefields, in decision-making rooms, in the seconds before a speech, in the moments before a big step. Rome taught us that true power is not in the noise that is made, but in the authority that imposes itself even in silence. This lesson has spanned millennia and remains alive for those who have ears and the courage to listen. If this content has taught you something new, it has made you see Rome in a way you've never seen before. So, reciprocate with a simple gesture. Leave your like. This helps this message reach more people who also deserve to see history with new eyes. And if you felt that something inside you woke up, subscribe to the channel, because here each video not only informs, it transforms.